Okay, we are back on the speeder bike build. I decided that I wanted to finish the handlebars before I move on back to the Jaguar. And the next step then, what I want to do is that part right down here. And you can see that's screwed on. Not permanent, but it's there. And if we take a look at this one, you can see, again, that's the part I want to make. So the first thing is to make a piece that will basically fit in here. So I made a tape template and use that to cut out a few chunks of aluminum. Right now they're just super glued together. But what I need to do now is put this in the mill and just take it down to the tape. And then those two pieces will be that shape. But then when you look at it, there's that round curved feature here where that part goes into. I think I'll make a piece on the lathe to then screw onto the piece that I'm making with that. But first step, and that was just kind of getting an idea of the size and shape of that piece that I wanted. So first step is to get all those edges milled flat and that corner or that radius filed so that it fits right there. So I'll get that done, and then I'll turn a piece on the lathe to start the piece here, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like here in just a minute. All right, so here's those pieces, and again, I just got them edges milled flat, the corner there filed round so it fits. I got that labeled for the right side, so that fits in here just like that. Now, obviously, I don't want that sticking out that thick, so I traced around that profile, and so that's what I got to mill off. So I have to clamp that in the mill at about that angle and just take all of that off. So all of that right there goes away. And I'll probably stop above the line and then test it. And I want it to be just a little bit proud of that surface, I think. So yeah, that needs to get milled down. In the meantime, I wanted to turn down, or I wanted to make a piece to mimic that shape here, that round shape and that flat side there, where that piston or whatever that is mounts into. So I put a piece up in the lathe, and I didn't have a piece of round that was a big enough diameter, but I had a chunk of square-ish, and I think that was used to help form the little rib things back there, I think. But anyway, so I turned that round, and I turned down the basic profile of that rounded piece. Then I put it in the mill and removed the middle part there. And then I took a chunk out of the top and bottom, out of the edges, and then I drilled it for some 080 bolts. And then this will get parted off. This will get cut off right about there. And so these then go, well, that won't fit in there, but that'll go like that. And I'll have a couple of bolts in there just for some added detail. But what I need to do is figure out how to mount these so they're coming out of here. So I think if it's setting in here like this, I can have a bolt come in from about here, down and thread in to about here, and then that will hold that in here. But obviously, I need to remove all of that material here. So all that needs to go away, so I can come in that way with a drill bit and a tap and thread it for the bolts would come in, about like that. So actually, here's one with a screw in it. So that'll get in about like that, but I have to remove all that material first, and I need to do that to both. Now I could possibly just mount that in a vise in the mill and then come down with an end mill at the right angle, then move it over and do it here. Or I could just split that in half on the bandsaw and do each piece one at a time. Not really sure. I think it'd be easier if I just split them in half and did them each one at a time. So that's what I'll do. I'll split it in half. That way I'll just clamp each piece in the mill and I can just focus on one at a time, drill and tap and get that piece in there. And it's very possible that that is not going to completely fit because the diameter of that is thicker than what I gave myself there. So I might have to come in on this and remove a little pocket to give room for that to set in here, which might kind of look cool if I don't screw it up. But so anyways, that's the plan. I'll get that shaved down. I'll get that pocket cut out and tapped, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, here's what that piece looks like now, how it sets in there. And you can see I didn't quite go to the line, and but that's what that piece looks like. And it just sets in here like that. It is sticking a little bit proud, maybe a millimeter, which I think I like. I'll probably chamfer the edges with a file, but I think that's good. So I measured the angle from here to here, and it's about a 45-degree angle. So on that part that will set there, I basically machined that. So that would be held on at about a 45-degree angle. Now there is some play this way and quite a bit this way. It does stick out here like I pretty much thought it would. So I will have to mill a slot in there to accommodate for that. And basically I just mounted that in the milling machine. As you can see, I cut it in half off of the other side. I just mounted that in the milling machine at a 45-degree angle, came down with an end mill and over. And then that wasn't quite enough. Let me take this out, show you what it looks like. But in order to have enough room to drill and tap for a thread, I had to come in with a T-slot cutter. So I had to go deeper down with a T-slot cutter. I couldn't do that with the end mill because then I would have messed up my curve here. So brought in a T-slot cutter just enough so, and you can see, I should have gone a tiny bit more. The threads kind of popped through a little bit, but that's fine. I'm not worried about that at all. I can file that off. That won't hurt anything. And of course, that'll go in with Loctite or probably JB Weld. And so after I got that to where the ball joint would fit in, just enough for a screw, I drilled and tapped it. And then I came in with a Dremel tool with just one of those ends like that and just cleaned up that edge around here. I brought that down just a little bit so the ball joint would have room to come back this way a little bit. And I basically just cleaned up. I also had to come in here like that a bit to give room for the screw head and just kind of cleaned it all up. So yeah, that will sit like that. So all I got to do is that for the other side, and I'll clean up that inside curve a little bit more. It's a little bit ratty, so I'll clean that up a little bit better. But I kind of like that. It's looking pretty good, I think. So yeah, let me get the other side done. We'll come back and show you what it looks like. All right, I got some parts made and some parts bent. And first off, on this one, I drilled and tapped for an M2 thread and counterbored in for one of those ball joints. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a little bit. I probably could have made it a little bit thinner here, but I think that's okay. And I had to anneal it. This would not bend without annealing. I did a sample piece. So I just cut a piece of aluminum and put that in a vise, and I weld on it with a brass mallet for a while, and nothing. I annealed it, and then it bent really easily. So basically, to anneal aluminum, you just cover it with Sharpie mark, then you heat it with the torch until the Sharpie goes away. And that just works. And so then, again, this was just a sample piece of the same material. So I clamped that in a vise and hit that way. And then I reclamped it up here and hit back that way. So there's a little bit of a joggle in it. It's not as extreme as the kit. When you take a look at the handlebar from the kit, that's a little more, I don't know, it's pretty close. I looked at a lot of reference photos and, trying to look at still frames from the actual movie, it's really hard to see what's going on. But when you look at reference photos of other models or people just drawing it or toys or whatever, they're all different. And some of them aren't bent at all. Some of them are just straight up and down. So I kind of compromised between the kit and just not bending it at all. But I think it looks all right. It works. I did both of them the same. You put them side by side like that. They're pretty much both the same. But as far as the piece here, I took one of those ball ends and threaded it onto a piece of rod. And that's just, as I said, it's just threaded on. That rod, I turned down on the lathe from a bigger piece. Well, that's how things work. It'd be really cool if you can turn things down from a smaller piece. That's not quite how that works. And drilled and tapped it for a 2mm thread, and basically just cut the head off of a bolt. So I had a 2mm threaded rod. I tapped that and just screwed those together. Now that came from this rod right here. This rod is, I don't know what kind of material that is. I got a bunch of these. I take apart printers, copiers, fax machines, and anytime you take something like that apart, you're going to get at least 2 or 3 of these rods of different diameters. And I don't know what they are. I just assumed they were stainless, but that turned down and drilled and threaded way easier than I expected stainless to do. I know there's different grades of stainless, and this is magnetic, which doesn't prove it's not stainless, because again, there are different grades of stainless, and some stainless is magnetic, despite what the jerks at the recycle center told me. But anyways, I don't know if this is like a silver steel or a nickel or steel. I don't know what this is, but it machines absolutely beautiful and polishes up. Basically, after I turned it down, and you can just kind of see how much I had to take off. After I turned it down, I went over it with 240 grit sandpaper. I went 240, then 300, then 800, then 2000. And that's just because that's what I had. And it came out just perfect. That's after the 2000. And that looks pretty good. So let me get that screwed on. Now at final assembly, I'll cut the excess off. I'll actually Loctite it in just to make sure. Also, I think I want to take the head down a lot thinner. I don't like how far that's sticking up. That's why I said I probably could have taken that thinner, but I didn't want to get it too thin. But yeah, I don't really like how high that head is. So I either need to look for a different kind of bolt or shave that head down. But for temporary assembly, this is fine. Again, final assembly, I'll do something different. For the other end of that, if we take a look at that piece, which again goes in here. So that piece goes on here. I've got some 080 bolts, and that puts it on just like that. Now, this is just a piece of aluminum tubing that I had. I turned an angle down, drilled it for a 2mm bolt that goes into the end there. I know you probably can't see that, but there's a 2mm bolt that goes into there that threads it into the ball joint. We just take a look at the other side of this ball joint without losing my bolts there. That's just what that side looks like. And again, just another 2mm screw holding that in. And I fully intended to thread those holes, and you can see I had to mill a pocket there because that ball joint was a little bit too tall, wouldn't completely fit in there. But anyways, I completely intended on threading those 2 holes so that would get bolted together. And I do have an 080 tap, but oddly enough, I don't have the right size drill bit. I had one I thought would work, but it was a little bit too small, and I could tell that my tap was getting really tight, and the last thing I wanted to do is break my 080 tap into this thing. So I'm just going to JB weld all that together, and for any of you who are upset about that, keep in mind those bolts are pretty much just decorative. I wasn't even going to put those bolts in. That was kind of an afterthought. I was just going to JB weld that on and be done with it, but I thought it'd look nice to have a couple of bolt heads just for detail. So again, keep in mind, it's just a static display model. So JB welded together is fine, but this goes in here like so. And then this can go in just like that. Now those screws, I don't like that screw head. I'm going to shave that screw head down about halfway, but that then goes in here. Plus that screw is way too long. So I need to find a different screw or change that screw head. And so you have some movement like that. I was going to put some springs or something in there, but I thought that was kind of dumb. Kind of pointless. You know, as long as it can move a little bit, that's fine. But that's what that is looking like so far. All I got to do is JB weld all of that in here. And that part will be done. I still need to make the stuff that goes up here. And of course, I have all of that at the same stage for the other side. So the next step is to JB weld that in and then make the parts here. All right, so the next part I want to do is that one. I'm going to do this in two different pieces. I'll do the little handle thing, they're separate. So what I want to do now is that piece right here. So I took some measurements and made a sketch. So that's the plan right there. And so what I did was I cut out some blocks of aluminum to the right overall size, which we have here. And then I just scribed on basically the layout. So what I need to do is drill a hole, round the corners, and then mill that away and mill that away. And do that twice, and then I'll have those two parts. The nice thing about these parts is that they are pretty much symmetrical, so I don't have to make two separate ones. I mean, I don't have to make a left and right-handed one. I can make them both the same, and they will flip over from one side to the other. So that's the plan. Let me get those drilled and cut, and we'll see what they look like. That's what these look like now. So basically, I used the DRO and the milling machine to get the dimensions here the same on both sides, and the dimensions here and here the same on both sides, but the angles were just literally just milling to the line. I scribed out the line, I put it in the vise and eyeballed the angle and just milled it to the lines and then filed it and sanded it smooth. And so those are those two parts done. And again, they are symmetrical, so left or right doesn't matter. And that will then go right there with more than likely a screw. I haven't figured that part out yet. But the next part I want to do is the part that goes onto that, this little handle looking thing like that. I want to do that next. And I've been thinking about how I want to do that. I've been going back and forth between just milling it out of aluminum or making a couple of pieces out of brass. Let me just make a sketch of it and then we'll figure out the material after that. I think I'm going to machine the handle out of brass, because what I need to do, if I can get that to focus, I need to attach like a little pointer piece on it that I think acts like an indexer. And I think I need to solder that onto that. So I'll make that out of a piece of brass and then solder a pointer onto it. I think that would work. Or I could just get a piece of aluminum that's the right thickness and machine all that off except for that little pointer. I don't know. I think I'll do it out of brass and solder the pointer on. and we'll just see how that goes. So I went ahead and laid that out on a piece of brass, and that's kind of what it's looking like. I made a mismeasurement. That is too thick. I need to take that down quite a bit. So I'll correct that, and then I'll cut that out. And actually, I need to thin it down. I need to thin that much off of it. So I'll thin it down on the backside so I don't lose my reference marks here. And then I'll cut that rough shape out, super glue it to another piece, and then machine and file those two shapes together so they're exactly the same. So let me get that cut out and milled down. We'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll take a look at the next step. Okay, so I got that milled to the right thickness, about 5 1/4, and glued a couple of pieces together. So now I will put this in the mill, and I'll just take it close to the lines, and I'll just hand file the shape here and hand file the curves and the end ball and all that, and put a hole in it. And then I got to figure out how to make the little pointer thing to solder onto that. So yeah, let me get it milled down and filed to shape, and I'll show you what it looks like after that. All right, that's what they're looking like fresh off the mill. And again, just going to the line or close to the line, I will then spend the next 5 weeks with some files, filing it to the line, getting the profile correct, and then I can split them apart and then file the other profiles, because these actually get thinned down quite a bit and all the corners and edges nice and rounded. And but yeah, I can keep them together so far to get this profile, then split them apart and finish them up. And I still need to drill a hole in it. So yeah, I'll come back to you once all the filing's done. Okay, here's those parts so far, fresh off the files in the sandpaper. I put a hole in it as well. It's probably too small, but I can open up that bigger later, because I don't know just yet exactly how big I want that hole to be. So the next step is to pop those apart, and just do that with a torch, or I could soak them in acetone, but I think the torch will be quicker. Break those apart, and then I can thin down, because these get thinned down, and of course all the edges rounded, and that end gets turned into a ball, and just kind of round it all over. So I'll come back and show you what that looks like when that part's done. Okay, here's what those handle grippy things are looking like, and you'll notice the balls at the end are not perfectly round, a little bit misshapen, but I've never free-handed balls before. I mean, I've never sanded and filed a pair of balls by hand. I've accidentally sanded and filed my hands or fingertips, but never a pair of balls. But I think they look good. They're approximately the same size and smooth and not lumpy, and I think proportionally they pretty much look the same, so I think that's natural. That one might be a little bit bigger, but it is the left one. I don't know, I might have to tweak those a little bit. The next thing I want to start on is that piece here that holds the cable, and you'll notice it's not symmetrical. So just like everything else, I start by making a sketch. There's the sketch of the handle, that piece that I'm going to make now, that other piece. So yeah, that's what I'm after right now. Notice that with the round part, it steps down about 1 millimeter. So I decided to make those two together. So here's what that's looking like so far. So again, I make a sketch on paper. I machine a block of aluminum to the right overall size. I use the rotary table to make the round and come down 1 millimeter. So what I need to do now is take that surface down 1 millimeter to match the lower areas there. So that all needs to come down 1 millimeter. And then just machine it to the lines, cut it off there, and then those two pieces will be pretty much done. I'll stop to drill a hole in the end for the cable thing that comes out of it. But yeah, let me get this finished machining, and I'll show you the next step. All right, here's what those look like now. So they still need some sharp corners filed and sanded smooth, and I need to drill a hole right into the end for the cable piece. Now for that cable piece, remember I had this, and I think I showed this before. And I couldn't remember where it came from, and then it finally occurred to me, I think it came from a reading light. So I went out to my local Five Below, and I found this little reading light. And now the problem is that this piece is not long enough to make both cables, so I had to buy another one. But when I saw this, it didn't look exactly like what I remembered getting 4 years ago. And so just to make sure that both sides are the same, I bought 2 of these because they're only $5. So for $5, you get a speeder bike throttle cable, and you get a thing you could make something out of, and you get a really crappy light and a chip clip. It's a pretty good deal for $5. So I just got to cut each end off, and then that will get epoxied into the hole that I put there, and the other end goes there somewhere. So yeah, let me get that done and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, here's those pieces pretty much done. Got the hole drilled in it. I'm not going to bond the cable thing in it yet. I'll do that after everything's fit. And I still need to figure out the hole here for that cable thing. So these are done for now, but that's what those are looking like. And the next thing, nice. The next thing is this. Now this has nothing to do with the speeder bike. I just wanted to show it off because I just bought this at a thrift shop for like $6 whole. And when I went to the checkout, the lady there was like, "What is that?" And I said, "I have no clue, but it looks cool." And so I Googled it, and by putting those in there, found out that this is a Centrivac centrifugal water cooling unit by Trane, and used for industrial cooling applications. And this is obviously just a scale model of it. And I thought that was pretty cool for only $6. So, I looked it up. I was just sure there would be at least one of these on eBay. No, nothing. I can't find anything online about the model of this. I mean, the real unit is like $24,000. So if this is a 1/12 scale model, well, then it should be worth, a couple grand. But yeah, I have no clue if this thing is worth the $6 I paid for it, or if it's worth quite a bit more or less. I have no idea. If any of you have any information on this thing, or have ever seen something like that before, let me know what you think it could be worth. I mean, I don't plan on selling it. I think it's a cool thing I'll keep on my desk or something, but I was just kind of curious. Now, I'm actually tempted to mount it inside of there. So when somebody takes the body off, they'll see that thing like mounted down inside of there. That'd be kind of cool. But chances are nobody's ever going to take the body off, so it would just be kind of a waste of a cool thing. So yeah, I just thought I would like to show that off because I just bought it and I think it's cool. So anyways, now the next thing is the actual handlebar grip itself. So just like always, I'll make a sketch of it and I'll turn it down and show you what it looks like when it's along the process. All right, so here's the handlebars, and you can see I've got it kind of countersunk down in there for a 2.5 millimeter bolt that will bolt it onto whatever shaft goes into here. And that's just straight through there. And so anyways, when you look at the kit part, you can see all these little lines like it's supposed to be like a grip or something. So I thought if I turned down some lines and then put some heat shrink on it, it'd look like a rubberized grip. But those lines aren't as visible as I had hoped they would be. So I don't know if I want to do that or not. That was my last piece of heat shrink that size, so I either got to go buy more or cut that off. So what I could do is just airbrush that with the rubber color, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with that. I mean, that doesn't look terrible, but I was hoping for a more, I was hoping for it to look more like, grip, whatever. So anyways, what I'm trying to work on now is figuring out how to make it twist. And my first thought was to have a piece of spring steel that would twist and untwist. That was a failure. That didn't work. So my next thought, which would be a normal person's logical thought, would be to use something like this, a spring like this, that will twist and untwist. So here's my high-tech drawing here. I apologize if you can't understand what's going on. But here's my throttle, or the grip, the handle. And there's a shaft that goes through whatever that goes into. There's that screw with the countersunk part. And if I put that little spring in there, one end will be anchored into the grip, one end anchored into that center shaft. Then it would twist and untwist. And so that's the plan. I don't know if it's going to work. I'll just have to play around with it and see what happens. But just wanted to show you where I'm at for now. And once I get those pieces made and figure out how to make that work, then I'll show you that. But let me know what you think with the heat shrink or not with the heat shrink. Again, I probably should have made those grooves deeper, but I didn't want to take a chance of breaking through. So anyways, I'll get back to you here in a minute. Okay, so here's a mock-up of those parts. As you can see right now, they're just kind of all loose and floppy there. I modified that screw head. That was one of those that I just kind of shaved down. I don't know if I like it or not. I might redo that. But so that's holding that upright piece on. Then we have those pieces. You can see that part that I got soldered on right there. So that moves, and I'll take it apart so you can see how the spring and everything inside there works. So on this side, I've got a 2.5 millimeter screw. And then the handlebar. I'll talk about that stuff here in just a moment. On the other side, I've got a 2 millimeter screw. And then here's those parts. So first off, that piece, again, just screwed on through there, cut the end of the screw flush. I put a washer in between it. I don't know if that was needed or not, but, you know, just to add some separation and some more detail. Like I said, I might redo that. I don't know if I'm happy with that or not. It doesn't look bad. It's just, you know, when you look at the kit part, I think the little nipple part should be bigger. But anyway, so that's on there. I mean, it's not like cranked down tight, so I can still move that. The shaft has a coil spring on it. And that end of the shaft will go into the handlebar grip. The other end of the shaft goes through this piece, and then that goes through here. And then, of course, that screws onto the end. But let's talk about this spring assembly. On this part, you'll notice I have a little pocket milled in there that looks kind of ugly, but it works. That is for that pin right there to ride in, because I don't want somebody to over twist it, so that's going to limit the movement to about a half a rotation. On the other side, I drilled a tiny little hole for the spring. I drilled that with that little drill bit. I use that same drill to drill a hole into that shaft for the spring. And so now, as you can see, when you put that on, that part of the spring goes into the hole here. I wish this would stay in focus like that. So now we get some twisty motion. And of course, with that little pin, as we said, that rides in that groove, so you can only turn it that much. So the idea is, if I bond that piece onto the shaft solid, then that will hold that shaft solid, and then everything else can be screwed onto the other end. So that's what I did on this one. So here's the assembly for the other side. Everything assembled. And with the bolt that goes in here, in between there, I put a spring washer. It's called a wave washer. Looks like that. And in case it's hard to see in the video, here's a bigger one. So you can see it is a wavy washer made out of spring steel. So when you tighten a screw down, it compresses that to give some friction on moving parts or to hold things kind of tight. So by putting one of those little washers in here, this now has some tension on it instead of being all nice and floppy. And I can adjust that with the tightness of the screw. On final assembly, I will put Loctite on that screw. I'll get the exact tension that I want and then Loctite the screw. Same thing with this one. I need to Loctite that screw in there because as you turn that, the screw starts working loose. So Loctite here, and then of course that gets screwed onto the main upright handlebar assembly like that. And so now this is free to move back and forth. This is free to, that's free to twist. And I'm thinking I might bond all of that onto this piece as well, because these two don't need to move. Those two can be locked solid and just have this move and have this move, and then those two can just be locked solid. So I think I might do that. Haven't quite decided on that yet, but I think that's the plan. I also removed the heat shrink from the one handle grip because I didn't like it. I'll probably just airbrush that with a rubber color. I do have some paint that's like a rubber color, and that way you can see the grip grooves on that a lot better. So let me get this all mocked up and put together, and I'll show you what that looks like. Also, I need to make or cut the hose to go into here, and remember that was that from the stupid little light. And just to make it look a little nicer when it plugs into the side of the body there, what I'm going to do is drill out the end of that bolt head and stuff it in there. But then I can just drill a hole into there for that bolt. That'll give me a nice little, like a grommet closeout piece. Then I can put a nut on the backside to hold it in place. So that's the plan for that. So let me get all this together and we'll show you what it all looks like when it's done. Okay, there it is all kind of put together. Nothing is finalized yet because I'm still not sure exactly how I want to finish it. Part of me really likes the look of just the bare metal, so I might just leave it like that. I don't know. It's either that or kind of do a black wash or maybe spray it with like a black primer, then scrub most of it off with Scotch-Brite or something like that. Not really sure yet. I definitely don't like how shiny those are, so I'll need to dull those down a little bit. But, and also, I'm missing, I ran out of screws. I ran out of the 2mm screws, so I'm missing one there and one there, so that's just kind of resting in place. And all of the other hardware is snug, but not Loctited, because again, I don't know how I'm going to finish it. I don't know if I'm going to paint those or just leave them raw metal. When this thing is all done, keep in mind, I still have to go through and do a full like fit and finish. For example, some of that hardware is too long. I still need to make the little decorative pieces that go there. I need to clean some stuff up, and so it still needs like an overall kind of just a final sand, polish, paint, finish, whatever. Hardware fixing. I still don't like that bolt head there, so I'll have to do something for that. But for now, handlebars are done, and I'm very pleased with them, very happy with them. And again, the throttle grips twist and spring back, and these have that little spring washer, so there's some friction on those. And of course, all of that can move. But I was also a little bit concerned about how close the handlebars were. But when you look at the model, I mean, that's pretty much center line, so that's, I think that's okay. I think that's fine. It took a while of tweaking and adjusting and bending the arms to get those to be fairly even. But yeah, handlebars, I'm calling them pretty much done. The next step, I want to build the control panel here, and then after that, the seat. And for as much as I would really love to get back onto the Jaguar build, I know a lot of people have been watching this patiently, waiting for me to do more on that. However, this is a lot closer to being done. I'm a lot more, like I said, there's not that much left on this. I mean, there's probably more than I'm imagining, but control panel, seat, foot pedals, the rack back there, the hardware, all the little tubes and stuff. I mean, it's pretty much there. So I feel like I need to focus on this and get this thing done. And so maybe that's what I'll do. I might squeeze a Jaguar video in at some point. But yeah, I'm really pleased with how this is looking. Really pleased with how this is coming out. And so yeah, I'm going to call this video done for now. And we'll see you on the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.